What's up, Cosmetic family?
Thank you for joining us on the Cosmetic Podcast.
Cosmetic means being a person or thing that gives rise to a phenomenon that is dynamic or energizing.
We're tackling topics and telling the truth.
I'm Keith Benson.
And I'm Rodrigo Ross.
So today we're talking to what I believe are two of the greatest CEOs in our country. And this topic we're going to talk about is Moonshot. All about CEOs taking this innovative and community engagement approach to taking their organizations to the next level. And so today we have Mr. Jorge Perez, who's the president and CEO of the YMCA of Greater Cincinnati. And we have Mr. Steve Ives, who's the president and CEO of the YMCA of Houston.
Yay!
Yes.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I was calling up before we were recording. I felt starstruck. I'm so excited. I really am.
Yeah. So we have the CEO series, and we wanted to kick it off with you guys because when our doors got closed, it was mandated for us to close. It was like, all right, well, what do we do? And you two took some different approaches at it. And then you also went into this whole thing with George Floyd incident, and you took another stance there. First, though, tell me, as a CEO, and that mandate came down, tell me, what were some of the things that came to your mind?
Steve, you want to tackle that first?
Yeah, I'd say my first question was, how quickly can I call Jorge Perez? Jorge and I, you don't know this, but we call each other frequently, especially when things are going sideways. And it's, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Am I crazy? And so certainly that, reaching out to the network, Jorge being a significant piece of that was certainly phase one. But that was an eerie day for me. I actually started the day visiting centers. And, because I knew that we were having to tighten up with some safety protocols, et cetera, and was checking in on people. I started the day in the southern part of our region. I ended up in the western part of our region. And before I was driving home, we had made the decision to close our Ys, and we were shut down by the end of that night into the next day. It was an eerie feeling at the time, for sure. But I remember being pretty clear in my head that this was not a short, and that's why I call Jorge, right? I don't think this is just a short disruption. I think this is the big one. I think this is the one that's going to cause us to both have to, but also, be able to make some dramatic change in our organization.
Steve so perfectly states the mindset of that time. I mean, I remember thinking, this is one of those movement shaping events that have happened to our movement over and over again. And it was clear. I remember thinking, are we going to be asked to close, or are we going to make the decision? Because what was happening in Cincinnati, and it was happening all over the country, is we had two competing challenges that began to emerge. One was caused by the other for sure, but COVID was scaring all of us, and the governors were trying to figure out what to do. And then it was creating a ton of challenges for those on the front lines, particularly hospital employees. And I got a call from a desperate leader of one of our hospital systems in Cincinnati saying, can you help us with childcare? And I said, how many slots do you need? And they said 1,000. And I went, well, the only way to do that is we have to convert our YMCAs into childcare centers. And before we were mandated to close by the governor, we announced we were becoming pandemic childcare centers in our community. We got a lot of pushback, but I felt like we needed to get going on the rescue and stop pretending that the YMCA was going to just simply continue doing Zumba classes and fitness.
Yeah, so, in that instance, Steve was saying he had this instant feeling that this wasn't going to be a short-term thing. And then you, Jorge, you knew that we had to be different. Talk about how hard it is to just make those decisions that are going to affect so many people. Like, that's a tremendous weight to carry. How hard is it to make those decisions in a time as critical as that?
Well, I think Steve would agree that role of CEO is an extremely lonely role. It's not like you can call people and say, hey, what do you think? And even if we're calling each other, we know we're in our own worlds, right? Houston and Cincinnati, and there's only a handful of people you can talk to. But I think at the very beginning, I remember having a conversation with our board chair, and he asked me to do 3 things. And those 3 things really kind of charted our course. One of them was to advance the mission of the organization. I remember him saying is whatever we do, in whatever condition we are, we have to advance the mission. And so the mission of the organization became important. Secondly, we need to preserve the why for the future. We knew that there was going to need to be a YMCA another 175 years. So we need to make decisions that allowed us to preserve the why without sacrificing the first mandate. And then finally, create a plan to emerge stronger. Whatever that meant and however long it took. And so those 3 things helped guide. It didn't make the decision any easier, Rodrigo. It still was very painful as we were letting our friends go on unemployment and making tough decisions about our facilities and our movement. I lost weight, I lost sleep. I was very afraid for our movement.
I totally agree, Jorge. I think, I was reflecting on your question, Rodrigo. In a lot of ways, it was easy to me because it seemed very straightforward. This is like, we're closed, we're moving into another world, but extremely difficult because of the impact it was having and going to have on people. So lots of emotion around what was about to happen for the people that we love and care for that are part of our staff team. And a lot of fear and concern about what's the future of our YMCA, what's the future of the movement. Certainly those emotions ran pretty strong, but also buoyed by, hey, we're closed. This isn't like we might close. No, we are closed. And one of the things that I think that was really helpful for me to get square on 2 things for me to get square in my head. First of all was we are a 1 branch operation and it's called a website. We're a 1 branch operation, and what we become from here will be decided based on where we're most needed in community. And I think having that singular focus was really helpful for us. And that's kind of letting go of what was, right? I remember being on a call with CEOs of Ys and hearing emotion in people's voices around what is happening to us. I stopped the phone call, drove to the side of the road, and I wept. I wept for the thing that I knew, the thing that I'd spent 32 years at that time, growing up in, becoming part of me becoming part of it, and actually went through an early grieving process for what once was, which was incredibly helpful because I really did let go. I let go within the first few weeks of the why I once knew and got extremely focused on building what will be the why of the future. And the hardest part, though, was, thank God I had a few people like Jorge who were saying, yes, I see it too. There's an awful lot of people in our movement that weren't seeing it. And so when other people aren't seeing what you're seeing or speaking as if they don't see what you're seeing, it can be really hard to feel in that lonely feeling that Jorge described. Like, I'm out there. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm overreacting? Was certainly, some of that second guessing that has went on in my head throughout especially the first few months of shutdown.
So Theodore Levitt, who's a German American economist, he said, creativity is thinking up new things. Innovation is doing new things. And both of you guys did some amazing work, continue to do some amazing work in your organization during this time. Can you talk about some of the innovative things that you guys did from a programming standpoint, from a building standpoint, from a new philosophy standpoint?
Steve,
Go ahead, Jorge.
All right. Well, there were 4 broad ideas that we thought of that was going to guide our decisions around that space. We called them the 4 V's around here. I actually made a series of videos about this. We needed to be virtual, and Steve talked about that. We need to be virtuous, which means we need to be mission focused. We needed to be viral, which means we needed to reach tens of thousands of people in this new environment, if not hundreds of thousands of people. And we needed to be valiant. We needed to make some tough decisions about some things we needed to do different. That then led us to really working on addressing some critical needs. So we became the food bank where people needed us to be food bank. We mobilized our members to call our seniors to check in on them, some of them even getting in their cars and going to buy food for their friends. We provided all sorts of online experiences. I remember we were testing online camps, and we tested Zumba classes, and the first ever silver sneakers class on Zumba or on Zoom, which was hilarious and frightful all at the same time.
Right.
And then we had to do a massive rescue on the educational front for very vulnerable students. We were watching these students literally get swept up by this wave of COVID, and we were frightened for their work. And so we set up scholastic centers to work with them. And so we were inventing the YMCA, focused on the mission statement. You know, Steve's comment about it was pretty straightforward is exactly right. Our mission is to strengthen spirit, minds, and bodies, and it doesn't matter the environment in which we're doing it.
For sure, for sure. Steve, I'll
Yeah,
let you
I
weigh in
think,
on that.
Yeah, so one of the first things that happened, here I'm new to Houston, right? So I'm talking to the head of the food bank, Boys and Girls Club, United Way, and everything. And we're having these individual phone calls. And I'm saying, and I asked them, I said, when does the centralized organization coordination happen? Who does that? And they kind of laughed. And I said, well, so what do you mean? This isn't a thing? And they said, no, it's not a thing. And I said, so will anybody be offended if I start like holding a meeting on a regular basis? And they're like, please do. So I started, new kid on the block, really. I started facilitating Monday morning meetings, and we had a 7:30 a.m. meeting every morning with those key players to talk about what's going on, what we're seeing, what we're learning. And out of that call, the food bank, we would ask the question, greatest need, biggest challenge you're facing. And the head of the food bank was worried about standing up enough staff to manage the food bank, the warehouse, the call center. And I looked at him and I said, I just furloughed 2,500 people. I think I could find a few of those who'd be willing to still get paid again and work in food distribution. And so we actually became a hiring company for the food bank because it was easier for us to bring them back on because they were just furloughed. So we invited people back onto payroll to be deployed at the food bank. And we had YMCA staff members in the call center, on the floor in the warehouse, staffing up their HR components, and went from a couple of food pantries that we were offering to manning and staffing up 20 plus food distribution sites. Now, a year later, we've distributed 9 million pounds of food to more than 1 million people. And, we didn't do it. We just used what we could do. We have human power, right? People who care deeply about it. I tell you, when we took some of those lifeguards and program people and invited them to come back, we had some that said, no, thank you. I want to stay in outreach. We had people like in tears having to leave that work because it was so meaningful and powerful for them. Now, a little piece about that, there was some pushback from senior members and operations folks, like, why would we take on a thing of that magnitude when we got to take care of our core, right? That's, it's an easy place for people to be in. And I just looked at them, I said, we got a chance to put a few hundred people back to work. Are you going to, do we want to say we had that opportunity, didn't take it? Became a no-brainer. But later in the year, a lot of those who might have had some hesitancy or pushback came back and said it was hard. Partnerships are difficult. It was complicated. It was complex. But thank God we did it because it elevated our brand magnificently. And so that, I think, was a partnership and was really powerful for us in terms of being out there, mission focused, as Jorge has said. But there was another piece in addition to the virtual stuff that he talked about that I had been working on really for a few years. And this is this idea that maybe we can entice people or engage people as members while they're not using the Y, and if they have no interest in using our fitness facilities. Be a member like you're a member of a church, but have it be some number. And so we charged forward with experimenting with this. And the first thing we did, it was very hard to decide, but we pulled the trigger. We said, we're not going to draft people for the 3 months that we had no fitness facilities. But our Stay With Us campaign was stay with us and support the food distribution and the childcare and the other things. We saw 15,000 memberships continue to pay their dues as a contribution, and garnered $2.7 million worth of contributions from our members. And to me, that just told me it's there. That desire to be philanthropic and be part of something big is there. So we continue to move forward that innovation around the membership model. As you said, it's not an idea. We're actually trying it. We're taking some risk. We're implementing it to find out the best version of it that will work in the future.
So, I had been following the works of both of you and your organizations. And I will say that many of the times that gave me the impetus to kind of speak out on things that we could do here in Dallas and how can we change the landscape. And so first off, thank you guys for just taking that step and being bold. I know it wasn't easy. I know there were a lot of different things and people coming at you, and keeping a level head and pressing forward through a fearful state like that is incredible. But then to layer on top of that, you two also managed to be really prolific in what many people have described as that second pandemic that we are experiencing in this country now, which is racism, right? And so this newest civil rights renaissance, so to speak, is really full blown. People don't feel like it is going to simmer down when we get a hold of this pandemic. How has that dual pandemic of racism and anti-racism strategies really affected your imperatives with the movement? Steve, you have been vocal across the movement about being an ally. And Jorge, I love the way you said what you said, and you cause a thing, right? And push us as a movement to be better in those spaces. How has this pandemic of racism or anti-racism strategies really pushed you and your organizations?
Rodrigo, you've hinted on the dual pandemic, but I would argue that one pandemic was pre-existing. One pandemic has been around for a long, long time. We just got really good at hiding it.
Yeah.
And what COVID did is ripped the Band-Aid right off and laid open what we all knew was below the surface. And it created a different dynamic for many of us as we were now navigating the impact that the physical pandemic was having on our social emotional pandemic. And it just was painful. It was, if I could use an illustration, it was this whole set of physical fear now wrapped up in emotional injury. And for people of color, it was emotional energy that for many of us just came right out. The video and the vocalness that the YMCA here in Cincinnati created was directly tied to a response by some of our staff. I remember getting an email from one of my staff members, and I was just asking how she was doing. She's a person of color, an African-American woman, and she said in her email, being an African-American woman is extremely traumatic right now. And those words stuck with me because I've never received an email where the very nature of her being was traumatic. She didn't do anything. She wasn't involved in anything. She wasn't out in the street doing something. She was simply being who she was, and it was trauma. And so I called her and told her that it bothered me. Part of this is some of you know that I have an adopted African-American daughter, and I was worried about her. I was worried about her through this individual. And as I talked to Courtney, I asked, what can I do to help? And I remember feeling a little apprehensive because I thought to myself, she's gonna ask me to do something that's gonna be too risky. But I was determined to listen because I think one of the things we have to do is give voice to the struggle we're in. And she said, I just feel like I need to say something. I said, well, let me get you together with our videographer. You guys come up with something and I will support it. Whatever you say, I will put the organization behind it. And she got together with some of her other friends and who had some similar feelings, and they created this beautiful video. We launched it, and you should know before, and I remind people, a lot of folks, if people think that Cincinnati is this real progressive, front of the line kind of environment. The Cincinnati YMCA serves Northern Kentucky, where Mitch McConnell shows up on a fairly frequent basis, because that's the kind of environment we have. We have a red state and blue state combination situation. And so these kinds of decisions are complicated. And so I wanted to make sure that I gave them voice, but not filter it. And at the same time, I asked them to protect it, help us create a voice that, and you guys have seen the video, you guys have seen how that stood up, and they did a fantastic job. And what I learned in that experience is sometimes I just need to get out of the way. I need to get out of the way and let people speak their stories, speak their truth. And 9 times out of 10, we're going to be just fine.
And Steve, I know that you protested, like you went out to the streets. Like, tell us about that experience and like what got you to that point.
Started in college, quite honestly. I remember, a lot of things I was thinking, feeling, reading about, like learning more about Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Gandhi. I remember quite distinctly wondering, sitting there, praying, thinking, will there ever be a moment in my life where I get to have that kind of impact? And when the rally happened here in Houston, there was no question in my mind. And it was a couple of miles from here, and I'm fasting today, and I am walking. And I walked down, a couple of my staff members joined me. We walked from my neighborhood down, and we're part of that. I tell you, it was an incredibly powerful and profound moment, standing on the green in Houston, Texas, hearing these words, there's blood, sweat, and tears, but today there'll be sweat and there'll be tears, but there will be no blood. This is our city. And I was just so blown away by, and that's essentially what happened. There was some stuff that played out and some people got arrested, but it was a massive peaceful protest. And I was there, and some of my staff members saw me there, but it was a very moving experience for me. But at the same time, we were, I had crafted a statement, a position on this. Interestingly enough, in it, I said, we're going to open an equity innovation center. And so I sent it to our African-American resource network and to get their edits. And they sent back some edits, including deleting that section of it. I sent it back and I had it back in, and they sent it back and they deleted it again. I finally called them. I said, do you keep deleting this? And they said, well, we thought it was a mistake. We thought you just copied it from, I said, no, I'm the CEO. And if I say we're going to have an equity innovation center, I can make sure that happens. And it was just this really profound moment for us around commitment around that. We put it in the Tellefson Downtown YMCA, and Tellefson family, very well known in the community. And there was a little bit of a courtesy call, but it was more just, this is what we're doing. And it's been some uncomfortable moments where Tad Tellefson, who serves on our board, of course, now his name is around this thing. And, and it's created this wonderful space for us to have some really profound conversations, including one that just blew my doors off today with him talking about, this is it. This is our moment. We are out front on this, and we're the other corporations I can help get us in front of to engage in our work around this. So the marching in the march, the being arm in arm with people was a piece of it. The building and crafting of our statement, the formation of what we're going to do. And as Rodrigo knows, minutes after we said this is what we're going to do and let our board know, Reliant came forward and wanted to give us a gift, and then wanted to do more. And we connected with Rodrigo, and they gave a gift for their equity work. And so we got connected with another Y around it all. It's just, when things start happening, you realize you're in the right place doing the right thing. So I'm just really happy for the opportunity to lean into what I imagined and dreamed I'd be able to do when I was just a young lad in college.
Yes, and thank you for that. Like that vision and that boldness. If I say we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. that led me to say, Houston's doing it. We should do this, right? Because
Right.
I'm quite the CEO. I couldn't say it like that. But
we're in Texas, right? We can't let one thing be bigger than the other thing. Like,
I don't want to start anything, but Houston is doing this. So.
I'm just saying. So, I mean, you guys took these bold stance in your individual spaces. And I know, like, for our association, you know, a couple of us got together, and, you know, it was a very emotional time for a lot of people. And it was like you had all this energy built up on the inside and you just wanted to release. And it's like, you know, how can we work for an organization like the Y and we not be on the front line? And so we did get to this place that we were able to have this just breaking the silence. What did you guys do for your staff team members during this time?
I think many of us held town hall meetings. I made myself available a lot and just listened and listened and listened. Some of it was educational, right? I had a few staff members that, because of their own journeys, were asking, so what is the Y doing? What are you guys doing? And why aren't you doing enough? And then I'd remind them, look, we're doing this impact center, and we're doing some work in cradle to career, and we're doing this achievers program to get kids back into college. And as I was outlining, I could feel them stiffen up and going, oh, okay. That's exactly, I was hoping you'd say that. I'm ready to go back to work. And so, but that was what the lesson for me is. When we do good work, we can't assume that people know we're doing good work.
Right.
We have to keep saying it and celebrating it, because I think the danger is in this good work is it just kind of filters on down and settles into the landscape of the YMCA. And before we know, we're talking about Zumba and Pilates and swim lessons and summer camp and youth sports. And pretty soon those individuals feel like we're not doing anything in that space. And so a lot of it was just learning to celebrate, and now being very intentional in making sure that we send out a report and it's part of our regular communication.
Good.
Yeah, Keith, I would say, you know, it's obvious if you look at the screen that I don't have the same lived experience as the Black and African American, the Hispanic, Latino members of our staff team have had. And recognizing that, I really felt like the best gift I could give is encouragement, which got perceived as permission. And, you know, I was thanked for giving permission. I reminded people they don't need my permission, but for true, honest, off the record conversations. So our African American employee base got together and they had an opportunity to just speak openly with each other and without fear of repercussion about the real lived experiences they've been having. I think that started a ball rolling within our staff team, which has led to us doing a bunch of workshops together. We're now engaged in a pretty challenging, we have 40 of our leadership members involved in what's called Brave Our space. It's about having brave conversations about race and racism. It's not an easy lift, but going through it and experiencing it sends a message, and I think also has been pretty powerful. I figure if we can have brave conversations about that, we can tackle just about anything is the goal around that. So I think when we opened up our Equity Innovation Center, we talked about conversations, we talked about training, but we were very clear that we're going to start internally. So to your question, we've been focused internally, and we've been inviting others to come along with us, alongside us, really, you know, emphasizing and standing up our ERGs and our internal conversations, our brave conversations, and our structure and network around it. The board this week will vote on a new committee structure, which includes a DEI committee of the board, which will be a formal committee of the board, and a task force that will be helping us engage more corporate partners, employers in the conversation we're having around that. But I think that it was key for me as a leader to recognize I can't pretend that I know what people are experiencing. I can have great compassion, I can care about it, but I can't pretend that I know what others who have had very different lived experiences in this country and on this planet than I have experienced.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, I could sit and talk with you guys all day, but I have got to get this question in before our time wraps up. If you had to tell folks inside and even outside of the movement, at whatever level they are, whether they are program director, frontline, welcome center, CEO, executive director, aspiring CEO, if you had to tell them or give them some advice on what they could do now to help us as a movement recraft and rebrand and stay true to our mission and ensure that this YMCA does outlive the dual pandemics, right, that we are exposed to, what would you tell them?
I would say two things come to mind. One of them is don't get accustomed to what you know and what you do. These are just tools. Swimming lessons are tools. Summer camps are tools. What we're about is the transformation of people's lives, and that has changed over and over and over again. If you had told our counterparts when the Village People wrote the song, the YMCA, because the lyric says it's fun to stay at the YMCA, not go to the Y, stay at the Y. If you told that staff that one day most of us wouldn't have dormitories, they'd say, I don't know about that. I don't know how we're going to serve people. So number one, don't get accustomed to the tool, get focused on the mission. And the mission is transforming people's lives. The second thing I'd say to individuals is don't get caught off guard when dealing with some of the significant issues of our time. My biggest frustration of our movement is we've been talking about diversity and inclusion since the day I came in the door. I remember as a program director being told, Jorge, your career at the Y is going to be so fantastic because you're Hispanic, Latino, and there aren't enough of you guys and you're going to have a great career. But you're at the top front end of that spear and it's going to be amazing. 25 years later, the number of Hispanic Latinos as a percentage of our professional movement is smaller. It didn't get better. The fact of the matter is that the pandemic broke open some inequalities, not just in our society, but inside of our movement. And if we have champions of diversity that say, this is what I want to be about, they should be looking at their bench and asking this question: if this happens again 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or 100 years from now, are we going to get caught again talking about diversity and inclusion as something we should get ready for? We should have gotten ready for it the last time we were here 100 years ago. We should have gotten ready for it in the 1970s, and we need to get ready for it now. So don't get accustomed to the programs in front of you, and prepare for the inevitable future today.
I couldn't agree more, Jorge. I think my advice would be buckle up and lean in. It's going to be a wild ride. So take care of yourself and be safe, and both with your heart as well as your physical and your emotional being. But lean in, and man, don't let those of us who have been around for a long time get away. And I would say the generation before Jorge and I told us that we just don't understand because we're not as experienced. And those words came out, and I'm not demeaning any one of them, but I know that we can easily go there. Don't let us get away with that. This is your YMCA. This is your future. It is a youth-driven organization. And, people like me are going to have to get over the fact that I fought and scraped and worked years in order to have the opportunity that I have. And some others are going to get opportunities like mine without nearly as much having to put as much time in. And don't let us convince you otherwise. And I guess I would also say to the women and the multicultural leaders, speed up, get going in terms of your development, put yourself out there. Don't be demoralized by the no's. I love telling the story of when I was a young professional. I was a lifeguard and program person. The first 3 full-time professional positions I applied for, they said, no. We love you, Steve, but someone else has more experience. And I don't ever remember feeling like, oh, this may not be the place for me. So I would say that to young people coming up, don't be afraid of putting yourself out there and getting a no. As I say in fundraising, every no is one less no before you get a yes. So I would really encourage people to lean in, speed up, not be intimidated, by the old guard who might appear as though we know more. We don't know anything about the why that's going to be. We know about the why that was. And this moment in time that has been, defined by the COVID interruption, COVID shutdown, whatever you want to call it, changes everything. And it's time for us to make sure that plays out in the way that is going to be most useful for the why, but also most useful for what Jorge called out, which is the diversification of senior leadership within the YMCA.
Man. Well, man, this has been incredible. Thank you guys for what you put into your work. Thank you for just the personal things that you all are doing as well. We're grateful. We hear it many times. I'm on different calls, different group chats and all that with some of your leaders in your organizations, and they brag about the work that you guys doing. And so, it's authentic because, we can't have that parking lot conversation about you, right? But I would tell you that your team members are, they're talking loud and clear about you and the positive things that you guys are doing. And Steve, I did need to ask this question. Are you still a foster parent during this time? I understand that you guys have been fostering kittens over the last year.
We have our last set of 4 go to adoption tomorrow. Yeah, I think we've had 4 or 5 sets that come in as mangy, rescued kittens, and they turn into beautiful cats for families. And it's really been a blessing, especially for my wife, to have meaningful, purposeful thing. And it's been pretty neat. So
nice.
I
knew I was excited for a reason today. You guys did not disappoint. Thank you for taking some time and sharing with us today. I cannot wait for everyone to hear the sage advice that you guys gave today.
Couldn't have been a better partner to do this with than Jorge.
Same here, Steve. Thank you so much. Keith, Rodrigo, thank you so much for advancing this important work.
So thank you all for listening to Cosmetic.
Well, we are tackling topics and telling the truth.
Subscribe and listen to us weekly.
And don't be shy, give us a review.
And as always,
Be dynamic.
be phenomenal.
Be cosmetic.